Hello, everyone. Welcome to our May 28th regular meeting. Mayor Irvin is unable to be here today, but he is joining us by Zoom. Hello. We do have one in-camera item, so just keep that in mind when we get to that point of the agenda. So if we can just get a motion to adopt the agenda. Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I will second.
Thank you, Councilor Paquette and Brunas. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then moving on to the draft minutes from the committee of the whole meeting from May 14th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
No.
None from me either. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We look so different on the screen here today. Anyway, so we also need a motion to pay the open payables in the amount of $184,759.65. I'll make the motion to pay the open payables. Thank you.
I will second.
Thank you. Comments, questions, Councilor Burgess?
The only thing I have is 62317. 62317.
Oh, yeah.
Brand Tracker.
Yeah.
That is work that was done on the grader and the loader.
Is it just maintenance?
Yes, we actually had seal go and they actually had to remove the motor out of the grader.
Oh, wow.
Then the other one is 62322.
63222 Northern Front. That is the architectural and project management for the rec center renovations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
16336.
62336. That is that payment based on my contract.
That's it.
Anything else?
I wrote down my thing, but I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so all in favor?
Big one,
Okay.
then. Yeah,
In favor? Okay.
yeah, I think it's one of many big ones, but I don't. I think those ones are the house.
Okay, so moving right along, is Angela for this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, all of you.
Yes, Angela is on
Hey, hi Angela, we eventually hear from BDO to go over the 2023 financial audit. And also Shannon Bergeron is here with us as well for that.
Great. Well, thanks very much for having me this evening. My name is Angie Spencer. I'm a partner with BDO and hired to conduct the external audit of the town of Watson Lake. So we have substantially completed that now, and it's just subject to the review and approval of council this evening. I'm happy to walk through the financial statements. Would it be easier if I shared my screen or just spoke to the page numbers?
I think if you can share your screen, that would be
Great.
so.
Looks like I have the power to do that, so that's great.
Awesome.
Okay, so you should be able to see that there. Okay, so please feel free to ask questions or interrupt as I go through. I will try to do this quite briefly. So up on the screen, page 2 and 3 outlines our overall audit opinion. So we are proposing to issue what's considered a clean or unqualified audit opinion, meaning that the financial statements are considered to be free of material misstatement. And that they are presented in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles for public sector accounting. So all municipalities across Canada are consistent in terms of their approach and how those policies are applied. Note there is a new paragraph in here, emphasis of matter, on restated comparative figures. And I will talk through that in more detail. We did restate some of the numbers in 2022. So if you were to hold up last year's issued financial statements, they have changed. And that was as a result of adopting a new accounting standard that came out during the year. And in order to compare apples to apples, the requirement is to restate the prior year numbers so that they're comparative for analysis purposes. So now up on the screen, I've got the statement of financial position. So this is effectively the balance sheet or a snapshot of all of the assets, liabilities, and accumulated surplus of the town as at December 31st. So total financial assets increased from 5.6 million up to just over 6 million for the current year. That was largely due to the overall surplus for the year. Less some capital expenditures that were made. In addition, there was an increase in cash just due to some of the temporary investments maturing during the year and now sitting up in cash. Accounts receivable decreased from 1.3 million to 695,000. Note 3 of the financials provides some more detail on what's sitting in accounts receivable, but in the prior year, there was some grant amounts from gas tax that were outstanding at December 31st, which wasn't the case this year, which created the decline. In terms of liabilities, overall liabilities decreased from 4.2 million down to 3.7 million. The most notable would have been the asset retirement obligation. So that's the second line there, which is the new standard that was adopted this year. So effectively, this new standard requires all municipalities to evaluate all of the infrastructure and capital assets that they hold and determine if there's any cost or future obligation associated with the retirement or decommissioning of those assets down in the future. At that point, management comes up with best estimate of what the costs of that decommissioning would be. And that's present valued to today's dollars. So the idea is that there is a more accurate, transparent obligation on the balance sheet for members of the public to understand what the future obligation or cash flow would be necessary over time to fulfill those the cost of those assets. The other side of this entry is actually sitting in tangible capital assets. So the idea is that those assets are actually cost the town more than was actually paid because there will be a future cost associated with those asset retirement obligations. So note 5 in the financial statements gives a lot more detail as to how that number was determined. And as you can see, there's kind of 3 buckets here that are the future asset retirement obligations fell into. So common amongst many municipalities is some of the older buildings would have asbestos included in them that require remediation under environmental standards. So there was a best estimate come up with the cost of that remediation. And then the largest, most significant for the town of Watson Lake is the landfill. So this is quite a larger increase compared to what you would have seen in the past as an estimate. And that's because it includes on the balance sheet all costs associated with closing the landfill and the future costs, like the operating kind of post-closure costs and remediation. So a substantial number there. We have also highlighted, I know that there is talks with the Yukon government right now. Nothing has been formally signed in terms of potentially splitting or subsidizing some of this liability in the future. Because that agreement has not yet been signed, we, currently in the financial statements only the full amount has been accrued for, but management will be monitoring that closely to see if there needs to be an adjustment in the future should an agreement be signed. And then the last area is the wells decommissioning, a much more minor cost associated with those assets. Okay, everything else should be much more, similar to what you've seen in the past and in prior years. So tangible capital assets is now sitting at 36.9 million. As I mentioned, that includes now the estimated cost of asset retirement obligation. And there was some new additions in the current year related to the Northern Lights Center ski chalet and the rec center improvements during the year. That's been offset by amortization. So I'm going to move on to statement of operations. This is a summary of all the revenues and expenditures for 2023. against budget. So total revenues came in at 7.9 million. That was down from 15.5 million in the prior year. The large decrease there was last year included in government grants was a contributed asset with the municipal building of about 8.2 million, which was not reoccurring this year. Expenditures was fairly consistent with last year, sitting at 6.8 million, up from 6.5 million in the prior year. Some of those increases against budget would have been amortization that was taken on the new building. And also we call it accretion expense, but accretion is essentially the amortization on that asset retirement obligation. So a non-cash expense that sits in your expenditures going forward. So the revenue less expenditures comes up with an annual surplus of 1.12 million for fiscal 2023. Some of that surplus, of course, was invested in tangible capital assets, less amortization for the year, and some additional purchases of inventory and prepaid expenses. So that is all I have to go on the financial statements. The following pages, there is the statement of cash flows, which ignores all the accounting nuances and just illustrates what happened from a cash basis during the year. And then, of course, the notes to the financial statements, which outline the town's accounting policies. And the only new one would have been the one I walked through, which is asset retirement obligations.
Angela, can I get you just to clarify for council the surplus?
Yes.
Like, because we didn't have a surplus of whatever it was, 1 point. Right?
Yes.
That's based on, can you explain council how that works? So it's not.
Yes.
Right?
So it is, it's not on a cash basis. And so of course there are some items, the most substantial would have been any investment in capital items, doesn't actually hit the income statement. So those would end up being, invested here in tangible capital assets or capitalized on the balance sheet. So yeah, so the 1.1 million is not really what the cash surplus would be. It's just, some of the accounting results of it. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Would that number be closer to 173,000? For actual cash?
So the actual, you mean from a cash transaction? So the cash flow statement actually shows an increase of cash of about 2.2 million, but the most notable there would have been items of like, the outstanding accounts receivable from the prior year. So there was about 600,000 that was received subsequent to year end last year that showed up in this cash balance. And in addition, there was the 1.2 million of term deposits that came due and increased cash. So you're right. If you take out those two larger items, that almost shows that you're in more of a net nil position from a cash perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Not for me. Mayor, do you have any questions?
I just from quick glance, the only major difference that I noticed was on page 5, the investment income. What is investment income? Where do we get that number from? Because it was 59,000 2022, 194,000 of 2023.
Yeah, great question. So, there is close to $5.2 million sitting in cash. Last year, it was spread between cash and temporary investments. And of course, with the high interest rate market that we're in right now, we are seeing a lot higher return on investments that's realized. Yeah.
Great.
And then the other reason that it's sitting in cash is the fact that we're currently, CIBC is offering us a higher interest rate on savings, and so a cash account compared to GIC right now. So hence the reason that the money's in a savings, really a savings account, and not locked up in GICs. We're making more money.
How often do we look at that and for lack of a better word, rebalance our portfolio?
Shannon's on it numerous times during the year.
quarterly? Ish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only question that I had. Thank you.
Okay. So is that?
That-
you just-
That's it for me.
Okay. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
you'll
for
just need a
being here and
motion
doing
to
all
adopt the
that.
financials. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Consent.
So,
We'll need a motion from council to adopt the 2023 financial.
I'm making a motion to adopt the BDO 2023 financial audit. As also level.
I'll second.
thank you. All in favor? Okay, okay, so next up we have, Randy and Janice Carlson here as a delegation. So if you guys want to come up to the front here, or,
So, yeah, bring a six. There's a microphone right there.
hello. So we'll hand it over to you, so you can kind of give us a rundown on the situation.
Sure, we'll share some information with you.
Yeah,
I was just curious, the information you submitted is online? On the computer?
Yeah, I got it.
yeah, you just get it.
It's electronic, it's not a hard copy.
No.
Okay. Not sure who would be in the gallery or online, so just a quick introduction of our history in Watson Lake, which most of you are probably aware of. I grew up here and graduated from high school 49 years ago. And Janice and I operated Bluestone Holdings Limited and have done so for over 40 years. We recently sold off most of the business assets and are semi-retired. The submission we gave to you on Thursday is pretty much what we sent out maybe a month ago to mayor and councilors, just for your information as to where we were at. There's 11 pages now. There's 3 additional pages at the end of it, but we'll get into that here in a moment. I'd like to just read page 1 over again, because it kind of puts it in a nutshell in case we need a refresher or just to get it out there on the table. We'd like to bring to your attention the decision by CAO Lockwood to revoke our development permit on February 21st, 2024, that was issued by the Town of Watson Lake Development Officer on June 12th, 2023, a period of 7 months later. During this time, after receiving our development permit, we spent over $150,000 doing site work. This is on lot 1138 on the lakeshore. Including but not limited to landscaping the entire lot with rock retaining walls, installation of fully approved septic system, installation of underground 200 amp electrical service and fiber optic cable to the building site. Site work preparation for the house and garage footprint included the removal of 200 cubic meters of unsuitable clay soils and replacement with 300 cubic meters of clean gravel compacted in place. This soil gravel replacement was done with the supervision of Mickey Thomas, of Liard Engineering and Management. Mickey Thomas also prepared a letter to confirm suitability for house construction. Mickey also prepared building blueprints that are engineered and approved by him for the house. We also spent considerable time and money with the Yukon contractor, Peak Contracting, to plan materials and subtrades for a spring 2024 start of construction, including a commitment from them for the summer season of 2024. Also note that we've owned this property for 20 years and done maintenance to the property and the docks during that time, completely replaced the docks actually. We provided a variety of assistance with airplanes and customers of Northern Rockies Air and other users of the facility. We fully intend to continue providing maintenance services to the facility and float planes. We'd like to bring to your attention the Town of Watson Lake zoning bylaw 3.2. And it's, there's a copy of it in there. I just put it in for convenience sake. We feel that it's a critical part of the issue here. And that it says interpretation of land uses, because that's what it boils down to, is what we're allowed to do on that property that's zoned airport or not. And we feel that a house is well within the interpretation of the bylaws. It also says in 3.2, typical uses listed as examples in the definitions are not intended to be exclusive or restrictive. Reference should be made to the intent, the impact, and the definition of the use in determining whether or not a use is included within a particular use. 3.2b says where a specific use does not conform to the wording of any use definition or generally conforms to the wording of two or more definitions, a development officer or council may use discretion to deem that the use conforms to and is included in that use which is considered to be most appropriate in character and purpose. Not in bylaw, this is my interjection. This suggests that there's quite a bit of flexibility in this situation when it says the intent, the impact, and the definition of the use, and may use discretion. Just the words. Okay. At the back of your package, there's 3 additional pages that just would have come out on Thursday. The first one is a letter of explanation and support from Northern Rockies Air, and I will just read a couple of lines from it. They made us aware, it's addressed to Town of Watson Lake Mayor and councillors, but anyways, it says, we also have rented dock space since year 2000 from Bluestone Holdings Limited on lot 1138, as well as lots 1136 and 1137, which we now own. We sold them those 2 lots. They use those, and then they also use the dock that's in front of our lot. Darwin said, we have worked with Randy and Janice Carlson and Bluestone Holdings for over 20 years at this facility. They have provided assistance with many aspects of maintenance, security, and accommodation for our staff and aircraft. We fully support their request to build accommodation for themselves and crew. We feel that the security provided by them residing on the property is necessary for the safe operation of our business, as well as other potential float plane users. The second additional page is just a copy of the dock rental agreement that we have between us and Northern Rockies. We've had since last year, and it says the agreement's valid in perpetuity, provided that the land is used for the aforementioned purpose. So long as there's no big changes, they continue renting the dock. And the third, yours might be a smaller copy of mine here, is just a site plan that we neglected to include in the first time we sent the package out. And the point of that is to, well, it's all the legal setbacks and everything for buildings and distances, the septic system that we put in, power line, all of the above. But it's also to illustrate that we're only using less than 20% of the total area of the land, and the construction, the building program is all on the upper bench. The whole lower waterfront and foreshore area by the docks is available for access to the docks, which is what we had in mind, which is what we've done all along. Basically, it's kept the waterfront accessible for float planes and users. So, moving right along, we are confused as to why the development permit was revoked in the first place by CAO Lockwood under the zoning of a airport. It appears the problem lies with the CAO's interpretation of the definition of accommodation. Town of Watson Lake bylaws provides as a principal use in section 15.5.2 subsection D, accommodation of flight and maintenance crew. And in subsection E, land-based facilities for a water airport. The bylaw states that accommodation is allowed. However, CAO Lockwood said, and I quote, the bylaw from his letter of rejection, the bylaw does not currently contemplate or allow for residential dwellings in the airport zone, unquote. But there isn't any reference to that I can see there. CAO Lockwood also stated that accommodation is, quote, to provide short-term or overnight accommodation for crews who are traveling through Watson Lake. And I don't see that in the bylaw either. Would not an 800 square foot house with a basement be a logical solution with approved services to ensure all environmental aspects are monitored, especially being on the waterfront? We are looking to help create quality first impressions of Watson Lake when people fly in and out by building an aesthetically pleasing structure, as our track record has shown. Please reconsider the interpretation of this bylaw in question and recognize that this does meet the intent as well as having a positive impact on our community. Janice and I enjoy living in Watson Lake and had surely planned to live out our semi-retirement here on the lake. In researching and discussing security at a float dock, it's worth noting that the float plane base in Mayo, owned by Jeff Faulkner of Alcan Air, and I talked with him, has 2 residential houses on it. And the float plane base in Lees Lake, I know it's British Columbia, owner Kenny Cook, has a residence upstairs and an office down. The other float plane base on Watson Lake is leased by Rachel Morris from Energy Mines and Resources and has a mobile home on it. We feel it's important also to bring to your attention that the British Columbia government land use operational policy for airports states in the list of permissible and necessary ancillary uses, Appendix 2, Section C, subsection R, caretaker's residence. Yep, it's British Columbia, but that's their rules for airports and float docks is caretaker's residence. I was wondering if anybody had recently been out or looked at the property to get a feel for where the docks are, and appreciate Dale stopped by on his way to work one day and just had a look. So that's great. Thank you, Dale. We're wondering if CAO Lockwood has visited the property lately and realizes that the house we're proposing is actually less than 10% of the lot size and is located in the upper flat, well above the float docks. We're not building something down on the waterfront area. As well, it should be noted that the large rebuilt dock used by Northern Rockies Air Charter is totally within the waterfront of their lots 1136 and 1137, and then our remaining lot 1138. The dock spans those 3 lots. There's only one other small dock, and it's used by Blair Sunby for his float plane, which is on the waterfront of lot 1139, which is the lot that now belongs to Laws. In case anybody was wondering why in October of 2023, I don't know if you remember, when the town of Watson Lake bylaw officer came to the property and said to stop work verbally, at that time it was suggested by the bylaw officer that perhaps just changing the property to country residential, RC, might be a simple solution. So, yeah, okay, so we put that idea to council in October, and CAO Lockwood said no, and pulled it from the agenda. I think the suggestion was we want to maintain float plane base, we want to maintain airport on the lake. Please be made aware that we never wanted to change the zoning away from the airport either, as the docks were always intended for float planes on a long-term basis. Just might have been a simple solution, which is why we spent significant money in a total replacement of the docks. And that work on the docks was all permitted and done with inspections and approval from 5 different government departments, including departments of fisheries and oceans. And at our most recent May 7th, this spring, we went in and saw Cam at our CAO Lockwood, sorry, at our most recent meeting. We questioned CAO Lockwood about where he got the reference to accommodation being for crew, and I'll quote, passing through Watson Lake. This would mean, if that was the case, that Northern Rockies Air Charter couldn't build a house for their pilot or staff either. Is that what's the vision for the community, to have more temporary housing, which means more people living in RVs and skid shacks? It would seem better to have skilled people build and invest permanently in our town. After talking with residents of the neighborhood and the community, the general consensus is that people support our project. It's been suggested that with the housing shortage in Watson Lake, it seems very strange and unusual to revoke our development permit. It's not here necessarily, but it seems to me a couple of years ago, the taxes went up from $600 to $1,100 on each one of those 4 lots, and I think the intent was to encourage people to build on them. So it costs us a couple $1,000s a year in taxes. Consequently, we sold a couple to Darwin, we sold one to Laws, and hope to build on this one. So it would seem like a logical progression. Unless the mayor and council are prepared to reinstate our development permit, we will proceed with an application to the variance board for, and I quote from the bylaws of the town of Watson Lake, an exemption from an official community plan or zoning bylaw, unquote. That's in town bylaw 5.3A. We're not convinced that Connie made any mistake when she issued the development permit, really. It's the interpretation of it after the fact. I think, in my mind, Connie interpreted it as, yeah, accommodation made sense. But mayor and council can see that differently, as CEO Lockwood said. He said maybe mayor and council sees it differently than I do in his letter, and it's there in your package on page 4 of 8, where he said you can bring the proposal as it is forward to council for due appeal process. And council may see it differently. And you're welcome to present your argument to them. So that's kind of where we're at. However, it appears that it could go to the variance board, in our opinion, because it's an exemption from an official community plan or zoning bylaw, if that's the way that's interpreted. Do you have any questions or concerns or want any clarification on any of this?
I only have one, just because you brought up like the BC government airport thing, did you find anything about the Yukon, like what they classify as? Because like you brought up the BC ones, which is great. I just wonder if that is similar to what the government of Yukon says for float plane or airport zone.
Yeah, I talked to Yukon Airports.
Yeah.
And they said that they don't have float property, airport property on the lake shore. The leases are through Energy Mines and Resources, like Rachel's,
Yeah.
I think, and like the one in Mayo.
Okay.
So they had no policy.
Oh, okay, so there's no, like
Exactly.
the Yukon had government as like no policy for.
It didn't appear
float,
so.
yeah, okay, no, I just wondered,
No, that's a good question.
I just,
It's very true. I couldn't get an answer from them if there was a Yukon government policy. It seems to come down to the either Energy Mines and Resources or the municipalities.
Did you try to get a hold of aviation and marine branch, like Yukon Aviation and Marine Branch? That's who you try to contact. I guess if I work at the airport, I just know that sort of, it works there, but I don't know if they had anything like that.
Yeah, I did. I talked to a couple of gentlemen there and they were kind of researching what Rachel's Morris's status was.
That's
They
right,
weren't
that's right.
sure.
Yeah, okay.
And I said, well, what's her status?
Yeah.
What happens there? And then that's where I was put over to Energy Mines and Resources.
I see,
And
okay.
they said check with her, and then, and
So they don't really have any like, it doesn't seem like there's any restrictions there through the
Well,
Yukon government.
Rachel suggested that she was allowed to build a house there, a building there, so long as it wasn't more than 2 stories high.
Well, I'm assuming, no, that's more for the actual airport, not her
Yeah,
float up thing. Okay, no, that's the only thing I had,
Yeah.
thank you.
exactly.
So I have 4 things. First, I mean, being business savvy enough to realize they're not using a lot, so selling it. But from your numbers saying that you spent $150,000 on an 800-foot square foot proposed building, which I did the math right now, without even building anything else, you're already $185 per square foot into it. Doesn't strike me as cost effective. Furthermore,
Well, it's the landscaping, Thomas, and, you know,
But
putting in
that's just for
separate.
starters.
Yeah.
Before you build anything on, so you're looking at like, that's a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So Thompson Drive, and we were trying to, and I heard you speak very passionately about not having any more housing on Thompson Drive as to, you know, that's not what people bought into the lake for, not to have more houses out there, not NIMBYism, all those good things.
Can I speak to that one?
As soon as I get done with my sentence.
Okay.
So there was that, but it's just like, okay, well, it's not okay to build over there, but it's okay for me to build here, so that seems a little hypocritical perhaps.
I think it's more about lake access. You know, that subdivision had no lake view, no lake access, so where is the lake access for those people? Coming down through the Float Dock Road, because a lot of people do use that road, even though it is on private land.
Yeah,
So I think that was more our concern about where is the lake access in that subdivision. The only, the playing area, I think, or what did they call it? Recreation was on the other side of Lois's house, coming down through that swampy area. So, and which is right in the corner where the floatplains are, so was gonna be the recreation area.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to have a recreation area by a floatplane.
no, don't get me wrong, I mean, you convinced me that
Yeah.
not building houses there was a good idea because we
Yeah.
could build other houses in other locations that weren't beside a lake as well, and so that argument held water, right?
But I'd like to add to that there might be a little misunderstanding there. It wasn't that we were opposed to building houses in that area. Some of the other people in the area might have been or whatever. It was, where are they gonna recreate? And so that was the concern. Yes, we need more lots and more housing. If it was possible, and I even suggested it, that on the other end, past Helga Thurs and past the Leslie Hunt's property, if there could have been a community dock there, or there could have been lakeshore access, so that people, kids, families had a place to park their boats and launch and do things, as opposed to in that corner where the floatplains are, that it would have maybe been a doable idea, and it was suggested, okay, well, we can't really do that because I think it was because the band had the land frozen or something, or
Yeah,
Linda had a fish camp or something. But anyways, I think there's a misunderstanding there. It was more about, okay, where are people gonna recreate? Was where we were going with, but
and the fourth thing, was when we were doing the zoning bylaw and the OCP, Janice in particular was very adamant that we had missed on the maps, that this was airport zoning and should remain airport zoning, absolutely, that needs to happen. And then when the airport zoning didn't quite work out in favor of, say, your development plans, then can you explain the timeline when CEO Lockwood went on vacation? And there was, knowing that there was an old map in the office, and then obtaining a development permit, is this a correct timeline? And using an old map? Like council knew that that was airport, Pam knew that that was airport.
The development the permit was given to us, approved on June 12th of 23. I don't know if Cam was here during that point or not. Or what CA Lockwood, I don't know what his holidays have to do with anything.
Well, because knowing full well that it was zoned airport and knowing
Yeah.
the uses, and because you've been in Watson for 40 years, we've, on town council, I was on council when we granted the expansion of Bluestone Holdings into the additional gravel pit to increase its assets value. I feel like council's worked with the Carlsons on a number of issues in your guys' favor in the past. However, this one here, due to your, I know you guys are very meticulous. I know you're detail oriented and organized. Because I've seen how you operate your businesses and just how you in general. So it strikes me as almost deceitful to,
I was
can
thinking
you speak to that?
that word, I was thinking that you might come up with that word. I don't think there was no deception on our point or any timing with it at all. This was the plan all along. we felt that zoned airport would allow us to build a house there. We had no indication. We were quite surprised to think that we couldn't build a house on airport. We were quite shocked when Connie drove up and said, shut her down.
I think when Connie drove up and made that comment that we should change it to RC, it was kind of a slapstick thing, you know, it was like, what, is that what we have to do? Okay, well, you
That
know,
wasn't our intent.
eh,
And we weren't trying to slide through some confusion about what the zoning was, although the Stantec map was up on the wall with a mistake on it for many years. That was 2023. You have the dates there, Janice? When was that
yeah.
it was pointed out that Stantec had mistakenly zoned
I
it?
pointed out to Zoe Morrison at the Stantec meeting in 2021. She was supposed to get back to me. I never heard from her again. I pointed out that it was wrong to mayor and council on November 7th, 21. And I pointed out to CAO Lockwood in person. We walked up to the map at the town hall meeting in November of 2023.
And
Or, again, it must have been 2022.
So we were well aware. I don't know.
I've made everybody aware that I could think of.
Wouldn't be, was it just, was Connie mistaken then? Is that what we're suggesting or something, or that?
No, I'm just noticing the development permit, which is a photocopy, but it says current zoning and it's left blank.
Yeah, or we had somebody filling that out and we're guessing they just forgot to put that part in.
Very convenient. Sorry,
Um,
when you knew full well I was there.
Okay,
um,
so, does it,
So I just want to comment. So basically from what I'm hearing is you're questioning the zoning bylaw and the contents of that in relation to what you guys are trying to do. That's
Correct.
basically what you're bringing forward to us today, is you're questioning the zoning bylaw. Okay, because you presented us with a lot of information, which I do appreciate, and you've done a lot of work. And, you know, obviously you're very passionate about it, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Yeah, it's that definition of what accommodation is on property zoned airport is really what it boils down to. Is,
An interpretation of what.
yeah, and we felt in the bylaw, that's what it says, accommodation for flight and maintenance crews. We feel that there's flexibility there for security. We've always had Northern Rockies there and there are people staying with us. The house has a basement in it to stay. We're not gonna open a bed and breakfast or build a hotel. No, none of that. It's a caretaker's residence is what it is. And continue to operate the float dock.
You guys want to do it on a seasonal basis, obviously.
As far as the investment, 150,000 is light. You have to see the amount of work done, a 200 amp service.
It's crazy out there. I went and looked at it. There's a lot of work done. It's.
But anyways, and Mickey Thomas, we've hired Mickey and paid Mickey for engineering for all the blueprints for the house and stuff. So it really does add up, and I don't know. I think it could be more than that or whatever, but anyways, we were fully prepared to start first thing this last spring, so we're kind of losing one building season over it as well. That's why we'd like to get started and move ahead with it
so,
sooner.
thank you. Sorry, did you want to say something, Matt?
Yeah. Something I just wanted to comment on one little thing. Just for Randy and Janice, just to say hi. I'm here and listening, and thank you for your presentation. There's a lot of information, and your investment is not unsubstantial. Let's just say that, and we appreciate you being a longtime residents of the community. We really do. Going forward, I think some of my personal or like our concern I would have as a council is allowing such a development in that location, and with new tenants owning the location right next door could open the door to more issues with development. If they see what's happening on this one, there might be consequential development on the neighboring lot. I know that as a commercial entity, they might have, goals and aspirations to develop that lot as well. And with further development in that area, that would also bring concern. I just wanted to say that because, you know, the process that we're going through is got to be impartial, and, you know, we try and think about it as a whole and for the long term of the community. It's never individualized. I just wanted to mention that for you guys. Okay, thank you.
I guess one thing to say is there is only 4 titled airport lots in Watson Lake. It's those 4 lots right there. I don't see the problem with that if each one wants to develop a house on 4 lots. Why not? Like, it's a beautiful area. It's not gonna impede the float plain base. I don't see the problem with having 4 nicely built houses rather than a bunch of temporary housing.
These lots are.
Just
about
for
3
just for
times-
clarification, I'm not saying I'm not for or against. I'm just stating,
Yeah.
you know, for future thought. For future
Yeah,
thought, that's all.
we understand that, and we've certainly thought of that as well. What's Law's gonna do on that lot? Yep, we're all wondering that, aren't we? Sure, well, I think right now they've got arrangement for dock space for Blair and maybe gonna rent the bunkhouse to, I don't know, Darwin or somebody for his pilots or something. But I don't know, but we thought of it, well, okay, if they were to build something there, it would need to be, as ours is, a caretaker, a security person for the dock because it's zoned airport, or they do something with zoning and bring it to you. But we can see Darwin having a house on his 2 lots for more staff or a pilot and stuff, because right now they really don't have great accommodation or whatever. I mean, we don't want to get into the rental business of competing with the bed and breakfasts that are on the lake shore or the Watson Lake. That's not, we're not building that type of accommodation. But I understand, what you're saying, Chris, and I realize it can affect your decision on all 4 lots, on the future of all 4 lots.
Okay. So we're not prepared to provide a response tonight, of course, but thank you so much for providing all this information. It's, we need to see all of that. Yeah, so we obviously need to have a really fulsome conversation about.
Is there any kind of timeline, what we're talking about?
It's a good question. We'll have to meet.
Requests. We've had these kind of requests sorry, Councillor Hanchard, just that
That's okay,
we've
go
had
ahead.
these requests quite often. We try to provide some sort of feedback within a timely manner, 2 weeks at the most. That would be a long time, and I don't think that it will be that long for us. I think that we can have a discussion and provide you with some feedback. I can't see Cam in the background, but I'm sure we can provide you with a formulated or not formulated, with a written response to your request ASAP.
It does appear well within the bylaws to have it go to the variance board, to a variance board, and have them look at it, adjudicate it, make an opinion or whatever it is. I'm not sure. I've got to find out a little bit about variance boards, how they work, what's the procedure. So anyways, yes,
Okay.
nice to hear from you within a couple of weeks would be great. We'd really like to get some work done on it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So next up on our agenda, we have the second reading of the Feeding Wild Animals Bylaw 2024-02. And so there are 2 copies in the council package. One was one that had some feedback from, I think, the town hall meeting and the legal advice that we got. And then the second copy is all of those points amalgamated into one. So that is the copy that we're doing a second reading on tonight. So we can get.
Well, not the one with all the crossed out, sorry, stuff, that, yeah, okay.
No.
So to make sure we still went through that one first, and I
No.
got very
It was
confused.
one like this.
No, I know, okay, that's okay, I'm just like, why is this like this?
Yeah. So
But
we
yeah.
can get a motion for that second reading, please.
I'll make a motion to do the second reading of the bylaw to regulate and control the feeding of wild animals within the town of Watson.
Thank you. And second by Councilor Pat. Any comments, sorry? All in favor? Okay, and then next up, we have the second reading of zoning, the zoning amendment bylaw 2024-05, which is an amendment to modify some of the verbiage in the bylaw, adding some definitions. Which we have been over a few times. So if we get a motion,
I'll make a motion for second reading for 2024-05 amendment to zoning bylaw.
great. Thank you. Any comments? All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the one comment there. Was, it had the hotel and motel. And does it also have like? Under the definition of motel, would that include cabins or like?
A motel unit, like worship can be a standalone unit.
Okay, that was another question. Other than that.
Thank you. Okay, and then next up, we have the first reading of the 2024 municipal election bylaw 2024-06. So we can get a motion.
I'll make a motion to do the first reading of the 2024 municipal election bylaw 2024-06.
I will second.
Thank you, Councilor Slayer, Councilor Burgess, any comments? Okay, all in favor? Passed. Okay, next up, we have the Community Lottery Fund Committee recommendations. Councilor Slager, do you want to?
Sure,
Yes, yeah.
I'll give you the closed votes version. This year, we had the first intake. We had just a little over $28,000 to in our fund. We made recommendations to grant out a little over $10,000. We have that final total at the end.
It's at the very
There it is.
last page, yeah.
Sorry, the very last page. So yes, we funded or we're recommending that we fund a generator for Bonspiel, to bring an instructor down for disc golf. We needed some more information about, the Northern Night School and Dance. We're still looking into it about various little details, but we did, approve some money there, at least so that not to hold them up. There's a couple of hockey camps and a golf tournament from Nelson. The hockey camp is not there, the hockey camp is in, what was it, you were there? Yes, Fort Nelson. Yeah, I did, it was both there. That was somewhere else. I didn't remember the location, sorry. Overall, things look good. There were some questions about the intent of the policy, but we're kind of working through those as a group, and if we need to like add clarification, we may come back to ask council for a policy change, but nothing crazy or extensive, just a slight tweak. And other than that, yeah, you'll have it in your package. Is there any other questions?
I don't really have any questions, but it's nice to see the amount of applications. And this was, oh yeah, this was right there, first intake of 2024.
So there will be another intake September 5th. Go over it, and if there's any remaining funds after that, we'll do a special meeting and contact various groups that we know generally use or take advantage of the lotteries.
Can I just add something?
Yep.
We were kind of looking for an exception on the hockey camp stuff. In the policy, it states that receipts have to come in for purchases within 3 months of approval unless an exception is granted. We wanted to grant an exception because we're afraid that if the exception isn't granted, it may,
Impact their ability. to
impact our
sell.
ability to go. Like if we say, sorry, you know, you have to apply in September, some families might not be able to afford those costs up front.
Oh, I
And
see.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
So do you need a separate motion?
I don't know, I think it would just need maybe two things. First would be like to grant an exception for the Royal Hockey Camp in Fort Nelson, so we can provide the funds upfront to go rather than retroactively. So
Your worship, I think by accepting the recommendations of the report.
it is. Covers everything. Okay, so make a motion to accept the recommendations of the Community Lottery Fund Committee recommendations.
I will say,
Thank you, Councillor Slater, Councillor Rudis. Any comments from anyone? Okay, all in favor? Oh,
Aye.
sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that takes us to the Housing Accelerator Fund grant policy. I believe Jordan and Graham are with us in the gallery on Zoom. So feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Henshaw. Thank you guys for having us tonight. So we're just picking up on our conversation of, was it last week or the week before that we had the public open house. There we presented one aspect of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is the grant policy program that we're trying to get off the ground. So council's seen this. I think this would be the third time. And we've added quite a bit. And we could go, I guess, let me just start by emphasizing what we heard at the public meeting, which was there's a bit of a lack of information at this point. And so that's one thing council had asked us to work on was the brochure. I was just in touch with our communications person today, and it's going to be ready by Friday. The copy, the brochure will be ready by Friday. We still have to print it and get it distributed, but that will all be ready. And that's going to kind of cover off just everything about the Housing Accelerator Fund, how much money the town got, what are the programs, who you can contact for more information. And we'll be distributing that to everybody in Watson Lake. About the policy itself, like I think once we got through some of the confusion on what we were talking about and like what we were there to discuss and all that kind of stuff, it was pretty well received. And so I think I might pass it to Graham to go through the particulars, and I can flash the policy up on the screen. We could go through everything, but it's quite a bit. Or we could just kind of speak to each area and answer your questions. So whatever works best for you guys. But I can probably share my screen and get this up for you guys here. Okay, Graham, are you there? Do you want to kind of go through this with council?
Yeah, sure. So the policy kind of starts out with that introduction. So kind of it's a lot of information that was put in your application for the Housing Accelerator Fund. So it's just talking about the needs that have been identified and kind of what's missing and the intention of this grant on like the solutions and the goals that it's trying to meet. And then again, we go with that policy statement, kind of digs in a little bit more about like what specifically we're going to be doing. Again, what are the goals, and then again, just lays out the intention of the policy. We get into definitions just to make sure like people understand what some of these wordings are, because what we heard at that open house was, confusing about what missing middle housing means. It's not something that people typically hear about, but it's a term that's being used by CMHC. So we just need to define it, and then we kind of break down like what that actually means specifically for people and residents in the town of Watson Lake. So it's these multi-unit housing, duplexes, triplexes, larger, and then the suites. That just kind of provides some basis for it. And then after that, we get into the development grant streams that we have. So we have 3 that are available. there is the suite development, which is the living suites and garden suites that can be added as a secondary use onto a principal dwelling, or the garden suites can be added on top of a garage kind of outside. And then the second stream is the multi-unit housing. So that's where we're talking about duplexes, triplexes, and even larger housing units. And so each of these streams, for one unit, you get that $40,000. And then there is a cap for the multi-unit housing at $120,000. And then, yeah, the other stream that was added, and that was what we heard from council, was this need to also to incentivize single-family dwelling development as well. So even with that, you can receive $40,000 for a single-family dwelling. Then we get into, who is eligible for this type of funding, and basically it's for people, residents of Watson Lake. So if you have a property that's found within the municipal boundary, then you're eligible. You have to make sure that your zoning, the zoning for your lot supports the type of development that you're applying for. Just kind of make sure that you're following the town's official community plan and the zoning bylaw, those sorts of things, and that your property taxes are paid. Then we get into the guidelines and procedures. And we've tried to keep this fairly straightforward, because that was also something that we heard, and there is just a lot of confusion about this. So try not to add too much to this and try to make it fairly straightforward. So for guidelines and procedures, we have our application process, which is it's basically how we're going to be, what's all required for you to put in for an application. So, that approved development permit, proof that you own the property, it's within the town of Watson Lake. You have to provide estimated costs of what your development is going to be, and that's going to help identify how much funding you're actually applying for. And then with that application process, we will also be supporting applicants with that. So they'll be able to call us, and we'll also be in town as well a couple times to walk people through this, just because it can be confusing, and we don't want that to be a barrier for people coming in to apply. We want this to be very accessible, and we want to answer any questions, and we want as much uptake as possible. And again, that's what we heard from council and as well from the residents. So the second part of the procedures is the review of applications and the lottery. So like I said, we will be supporting with the review of applications. People will be applying for a lottery. Again, from what we heard, that there's going to be a lot of interest in this, and we kind of have about up to about 10 applications that could be approved potentially. So there is a limit. So the lottery kind of gives it everyone an equal chance, and also provides fairness to everyone. So it's kind of difficult if you're taking in applications and you're trying to grade them or something like that. That's very challenging, and it isn't as forthright. So we want to make this again as fair to everyone. And we also, one of the things that we added to this was the timelines, which we added when applicants would be told of their status of their application after the lottery, whether they were approved or not. And then it also added a requirement of individuals that were selected to provide notice within 10 days that they would be undertaking this work. So that was added in because, again, at the town hall, what we heard was that individuals were concerned that maybe if you were approved, you wouldn't be that, there might be inaction, and then that funding would kind of lapse at the end of the timeline, at the end of 2026. So we're just trying to kind of, encourage people to really kind of move on this funding once they receive it. The second is the disbursements of funds. So again, we heard that, it's not a good practice to provide funding upfront, but that at 50% of the completion of the project, we could provide 75% of the funding, because that could really help people out, kind of pay if they've taken out a loan for this, they could pay that off, and then could help fund the addition, the remaining portion of their project. And then at the end of the project, once you kind of get all your final inspections, your occupancy, close your building reports and everything, then you would get the remaining 25% of those funds. So then we have the implementation. This kind of like lays out some of like the rules and kind of digs into more of the nuance of the policy. So again, there's a requirement for approved development permit, the type of funding that's being requested, lays out when this is available for. So if anyone has a development permit that has been approved after January 1st, 2024, they can also apply for this funding. And then this funding is available until the December 1st, 2026, which is the end of this program date, again, which is set out by CMHC. So these are not our timelines, but CMHC. So we're just following that. Is this too much detail, or is this helpful?
We're almost at the end, so I think, yeah, you can just go through whatever is important in the last bit here, and then we'll talk about it with the council. It's all good.
Sure. So the rest is basically like everything that you're applying for needs to comply with any existing bylaws within the town. Talks about that you can apply for multiple suites if it's supported. If you're applying for a single family dwelling, you can also apply for a secondary suite. So that would be one application you put in for single family dwelling and a living suite or a garden suite. So that'd be one application, even though it's two streams. Just talks about the rules, what's going to be required to show that when you're asking for disbursement of funds, what are the requirements that are needed, which is that cost breakdown pictures, or you could have the development officer stop by and look at it. We talk about that at final disbursement. One thing that I added in the this number 9, and again, kind of comes from what we heard at the town hall, was that people want to make sure that individuals that receive the funding are actually going to be using it and encouraging them to do that. So we added in the word voided, which comes right out of the zoning bylaw, section 6/6, which talks about that any development permit that is issued and no action occurs from it within 12 months, it becomes voided. So it kind of allows that people, if someone hasn't like taken any steps to do a development and they haven't like provided any reasons for it, this funding, you know, their funding would be then voided, and then it could go out to the next person that's on the wait list for that grant. Also, there's a requirement for applications to sign a declaration that the units will not be used for short-term rentals. There's the addition that the development grant will cover up to 100% of actual eligible costs to the maximum amount prescribed for each grant stream. Typically, in a lot of these grants, funding is provided to 50% of costs. But again, what we heard from council as well as from at the town hall is that people want to see 100% of costs reimbursed. So that was added. And then the next two talk about what are eligible and ineligible costs. So the ineligible is landscaping costs to the property or other improvements that are not directly related to the creation of new units, as well as labor costs for work completed by the homeowner are not eligible for reimbursement. And that becomes a very tricky thing to try to provide fairly and evaluate, because people can say that their time is worth other things, and it's a way to kind of helps people cut down on their costs. And then the last talks about if you receive this grant, it doesn't preclude you from any other grant stream. So that's where we talk about the $10,000 grant that can be received from Yukon Housing for developments. And then there's also the development incentive grant that you can apply for directly to the town for I think a reduction of your taxes over a certain amount of years. So that was a very look.
Thanks, Graham. And I think like it just our personal opinion is it covers everything and reflects back like what we heard. Here to kind of present like the kind of our final like draft tonight. Once the drafts have kind of approved in principle, we'll put it in the proper format for policy for the town. And we'll get that approved at a future meeting of council. And I guess like our goal all along has been to kind of shoot for having that lottery in July. So if we're kind of coming up to, the end of May now, yeah, we don't have a lot of ton of time to waste. So yeah, just open it up for questions at this point, I guess.
I only have one. There was somebody at the town hall meeting that was asking about modular homes and like if that grant could be used for some of that. Like I don't know, it just wasn't in there, and I was just following up on that.
Yeah, so I actually spoke to that individual this past week, and we felt like his plan for a manufactured home would be eligible. Yes.
Yeah, your worship, it falls under our definition of a single family.
Oh, okay, no, it's just such a weird thing because it's sort of built and it sort of comes. Yeah, okay, no problem.
One of the things that just popped into my head, not thinking about it previously, but where did the Better Build Fund go? Where did that end up? And was any of this factored, like, could you talk to some of that in respect to how anybody could access that and the funding?
Sorry, it says.
Did it actually talk about the Better
Well,
Build?
it talks that, your worship,
Sorry.
talks that it refers that you can actually access other funding spots.
Other grants.
Better Building, fund, has a whole raft of criteria on it. And mostly it's built on building envelope. So not towards suites, but if you were taking an old house, renovating it to put, a guest suite plus your own, then yes, it would be eligible. But under the Better Builds, it goes under as a development improvement tax, so it actually goes on your taxes over 15 years or whatever to pay it off. So, but those are all eligible program. Any program out there is eligible under this definition.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if it had fallen by the wayside, the Better Build, or we just haven't, like, it was all the talk for a while and then we haven't heard anything about it. So that was my other kind of piece to this.
Yeah,
Well,
it's not
you mentioned about feasible.
Well, it's not, it's a program, yeah, it's a territorial,
Right.
one, that's why we talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, this fortunately, or whatever, however you want to look at it, this has nothing to do with that. But I guess an important point that you emphasize, Councillor Briquette, is that applying for this funding and receiving this funding doesn't preclude you from applying for any other funding that's available. And that's kind of like an important piece of this policy. Like, we want people to get as much help as possible to build housing in Watson Lake.
So Emily Adam McLeod was at that meeting, and she was expressing a eager interest into how the rest of the money, and this is great because this is 1/5 of the total funding pot. And if we are at this current rate of explanation, we'll have it all done by next May, I guess, but perhaps we could make a concerted attempt at explaining the rest of the money that people might be eligible to apply for before the snow flies again.
And then that was in the brochure.
Yeah, that's what they.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah, council and the public had asked for that. And I think, like, fair to say on our side, like, we're just like gearing up, I guess, in some ways. So trying to do the most important things that council's asked us to do, but also bringing on team members like a communications person to support this process. And so, yeah, council asked for a brochure that should be ready on Friday, I've been told, and then you guys would be able to have eyes on that before it goes out to the public.
Thank you. I think this policy looks really good. I think that it's straightforward and yeah, I think it looks good.
Would you say gold star worthy?
I might.
I'm just kidding.
I guess my only request is when you do the brochure, that it's in language that, people can actually understand. Because we need to just think about all areas of literacy in respect to what people people are able to
Yeah,
understand and read.
that's
That would be my only recommendation about the pamphlet, if I can just put anything up there.
That's a good point, and honestly, that was one of the things I appreciate about this policy as well, is that it was just like really easy to
Simple.
understand, it was just.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm putting that up there, because the policy is quite nice, and so if the brochure can just mimic that, that would be great, thanks.
Yeah, it should be like a totally professional brochure. We have a professional working on it, so like we'll give you guys a chance to just provide some feedback. We'll send it across your way before we print it.
Thank you.
So Mayor Irvin, did you have anything to add?
I do not have anything to add. I agree that the policy looks great. Thank you for your work. Looking forward to seeing the pamphlet. I think the information is critical. There has been lots of questions about all streams of funding. So thank you for all your work, gentlemen. Looking forward to that.
And then I guess my only other question is, do you need anything further, like just from us tonight? Like we're not adopting this tonight.
We'll bring this back since it's a policy. You guys can just adopt it in one meeting. So we'll transpose it to the proper format. So like on Watson Lake letterhead and all that kind of stuff, and then that'll come back at a future, probably the next meeting for you guys. And then the pamphlet, probably be able to share that with you guys like late this week, early next week. We might just do that through email. I don't know, or I could present it at a meeting. Whatever you guys.
Email's fine for me.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. You can. I'll say, figure this out.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, thank you for all your feedback. It really helped. Thank you.
Okay, see you guys later.
You bet.
See you.
Good night. Bye. Okay, and so our last item on the, one of the last items is the Zach Bell Award for the 2024 valedictorian. This is a bursary that's provided every year for, I don't know, quite some time to yeah. So Councillor Paquette is recusing herself from the conversation. Thank you. Okay, so I guess typically in the past, the amount has been $500, and that's awarded to the valedictorian for the year.
That's it.
That's it.
Make a motion to accept the recommendation from the school that we award Isabel Paquette with the Zach Bell Award for the 2024 valedictorian.
Thank you. Oh.
No, I got it.
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, all of you.
Aye.
Okay, passed. And
I'll be
that's,
happy. I'll be happy to present that at the Watson Lake grad ceremony.
Wonderful, thank you for doing that.
June 8th, 1 o'clock.
The grad ceremony.
I'll be there.
Is joining us again. Yeah. And so that concludes our. I know, I know, our, concludes our list of, I don't know what I was gonna say now. Anyway, so we're moving on to council report, so if anybody has anything, feel free. Miss.
That's nothing for me.
Okay.
The only question I have is, so with all the big heavy trucks going down the street here, I'm just wondering, like, because the road's getting pretty beat up. So after they're done doing that, are they gonna fix the road or do we wait and I don't know the procedure there?
Yeah, so your worship, we have commitment from Community Services Lands Branch, so any of the streets are beat up due to the hauling. When they do the chip seal, they will fix that as well.
All of them.
Yeah.
Well, but it's like, especially that corner of Highland, like, it's like gravel now.
Francis,
Yeah.
same and same with.
Yeah, and so that's what I was wondering, yes. And then some of the puddles are getting pretty big.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
And the other issue you wish to go with that is the fact that we cannot pick full mix right now.
That's good.
Okay,
I have two questions.
sure, go ahead.
First question, last council meeting, we talked about a town crier, just because of everything that's happening in town, in the community. hoping to have some sort of flyer, some sort of information to go out, and maybe timely with the Housing Accelerator Fund, etc. And then my second question to administration is just on our capital budget. We have budgeted playgrounds. Curious as to whether or not there's progress, where we're at with that.
So, your worship, for the record, the newsletter has been spoken with our new intern who starts on June 10th and is gung ho to be doing the newsletter right now.
Excellent.
He's actually sitting in the.
Great.
Great, and then the other one, the playgrounds, yes, we're still working on drafting the RFP for playground design upgrades. Unfortunately, it's in our queue and we are working on the tenders based on, I hate to say it, but priority. It's not that a playground isn't a priority, but heating systems are more of a priority to heat than a playground at the moment. So it is in the queue and we're working to get it out.
That's something that we, the canoe on is funding for play structures.
That's just to buy items through Canoe. It's not for,
They just-
they're not speccing and design and.
You just find the stuff that you wanna buy.
Yeah, we get a deal on it, right?
You get a deal.
Yeah,
This is,
but would we, when we do finalize that, is that something we would go through canoe then?
I think it would be something we put out for tender for a company as part of the proposal, is that they propose, they look at the Highland Park, they look at the park on Tesla, and they look at all our parks based on our information and pictures, and they come in with a proposal and they say for X number of dollars, we can do this, and this to upgrade your parks to bring them up to the new standard. And we know, we will, in part of that RFP, it'll show that we have a budget of X. And it goes out to these companies and they design based on what we have and then present to council. Council picks based on the proposals that are presented. So they're all based on the same dollar amount. And then you look at what the companies are offering. And then we go ahead and action it.
Oh, okay, so we would put, that would be part of the tender, we would need to supply the,
That's part of the
okay,
request for proposals, yes.
okay, thank you.
I would just also say that the season for building playgrounds is shorter. So just to throw that out there. But thank you.
You can find one of many playgrounds around Wilson Lake, I'm sure.
Want to write this down?
That's the greatest system.
Yeah, I think, well, one thing for sure, the training for that new trailer that's coming up, are we inviting like Wildland as well as, the other person, like, I'm not sure who they have on their fire brand, like, I'm just asking that just because, like, as long as we get people that do that in our community trained on that, then everybody sort of knows.
Yep. So, the list of candidates is huge, even his worship and myself are on the course.
Okay.
Along with, Glenn, our director of operations, because it comes down to essential services and anybody's watched Bart Nelson, Mayor Irvin, or whoever the mayor is at the time will be standing beside me when everybody's kicked out of town. But we have our fire department, we have Wildland Fire, Yukon First Nation Fire Department on it, Yukon Government Shot Team, which is their specialty, whatever. We actually have some Dawson City Fire Department people around it. So there's a wide berth of the.
That's great.
Yeah, we've maximized every seat that's out there, to fit people that are gonna be the hands-on.
That's what I mean, like, just anybody that's gonna be fighting fighters
Is there
around.
anybody else that we want to have on these?
Yukon Government has, sprinkler trailers. We had a meeting on emergency preparedness last week. And there was BC Wildland, people from D's and Atlan, and then Yukon Government there as well, and I gave them the tour of the structural protection unit.
Yeah.
And, yeah, they were very envious and they wanted to actually bring their procurement people down to see our trailer.
Well, I was talking to AJ, because I think he was
Yeah.
probably
They're
there.
there. So.
And, yeah, they're looking into getting one as well, lower post, down close, which would be great.
I mentioned this before, but once the training is kind of completed, maybe you need to have like a little community event around it so people can actually
See,
check it out and see what
Yeah, we actually got it at wildfire, Fire Smart Barbecue on Friday.
Yeah,
We had-
unfortunately, it was between
Yeah,
working hours. So-
Yeah, so with the 150 plus people were in the barbecue, it was amazingly well attended. But we also have plans to have it at other events. And once our new fire chief arrives, which is, like I said, well, which is not on my report, because I don't have a report tonight. But he arrives on the 17th. And then part of that is we're gonna do an open house of the fire department, bring people in and do demonstrations stuff. They've been working on a plan. Joey and the guys have been working on a plan for quite a while about hosting open house plus recruitment barbecue. So people can see what we have and those type of things. So that's all part and parcel of that. And the new water tanker tender arrives next Wednesday on site. So it's just gonna augment everything we're doing to put the community safety at paramount.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you talked about the seats and you said you have, well, how many seats did you, open up for people to train?
I honestly don't know the numbers Joey was dealing with it, but I think there's 3 instructors and I'm not sure if there's 18 or 20 seats that were available. They have a ratio to instructor
Oh,
number, so it was based on that.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And there'll be more training because that was part of that federal government funding that Joey accessed. And it's a 3-year funding pot. So there's training this year, next year, and the following year.
Can we train our own, like, so if somebody
Once we've had the training.
then we can train our own as well.
Yeah,
So-
and when you see the trailer, it's unbelievably well designed, and it gets down to they dummy proofed it. They actually have the design for each one of the stands and how to mount it on the door in the trailer. So you're looking at a picture, step 1, step 2, step 3,
Right.
all the way through. They put it down.
Easier than IKEA furniture.
Yeah, definitely easier than our kind furniture.
That's cool. Okay. Yeah.
And everything is on the truck, which is cool, right down to the screws, everything is
Yeah,
on the truck, and it's all labeled. which is
Everything's
really
like,
neat, so.
there's a label for everything that's on there, and
Yeah.
everything's accountable. There's a
Absolutely.
check sheet that, by shelf with a picture, and even the stands that everything sits on, so nozzles or the sprinklers are all in stands, and if one's missing, if one's empty, you're missing something. And where the water pipes and the garden hose adapters go, they're a certain height, and they're designed so that the right number goes right to the top. So if there's that much sticking out, you're missing the fitting.
That's cool. That's
So it's very well designed. So, yeah, so it was, we will do an orientation, and the council wants, we will set up a tour for them as well.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Thank you.
I just thought of something. I just would like to, for anybody who's listening and anybody who might read the minutes later, there is a public hearing on Tuesday, June 4th regarding the electoral boundaries. Interim report. I don't have my phone with me, so I can't tell you the exact wording, but it's between 1 and 3 p.m. Again, up for choice of time for the middle of the week. However, it's in regards to how rural Yukon will be represented in the legislature going forward. So it's really important for as many of us to go and at least be aware of what's going on. So just putting that out there. Tuesday, June 4th, 1 p.m.
First.
at the rec center.
Is it in the community center then, or is it at the Curling Lounge, or?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head.
I think it's usually in the curling lounge, but it's, somewhere at the rec center.
Yeah, and this is Electoral Boundaries Commission.
Yeah.
Which means that we would have an elected official from Watson Lake.
No, we are in
Sorry?
I think.
In the interim report, they're actually changing the Watson Lake boundaries, and they're proposing that Watson Lake, Ross River, and Farrow would become one riding. And those 2 would be taken away with Teslin.
And then they would be increasing the number of seats in Whitehorse by 2, and reducing the amount of seats in rural Yukon by 2. Therefore, Yeah.
What are the two seats, so, Old Crow's one, right?
Yeah, and then they're juggling the other boundary lines, so they're taking Ross River Trail, putting with us.
They were their own seat, not
No, they went with Teslin, and now they're gonna put Teslin with somebody else, so that eliminates a seat.
I see, I see.
And then eliminating Old Crow, so those are two seats which would go to Whistle Bend.
See, why wouldn't they just,
Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Please voice your concerns and ask those questions,
Okay.
100%. Anyway, that's all for me. Anyone else, last chance? Okay, so, with that, we will move to our in-camera portion of the meeting. Thank you all, gallery, for coming. We'll be talking with you soon.
Make a motion to go on camera.
Second.
Okay.
And who seconded? I will. No, I want you as the motioner.
Two, Councilor Bruce. All in favor?
And then adjournment.
Motion
Adjourn.
adjourned?
Adjourn.